Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue on with our discussions of the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2021. And I'd like to focus our attention today, if I may, on another very fascinating and emotionally effective drama. And this is a film from 1996. The Criterion Collection has designated this film with spine number 1070, and the name of the filmmaker is Mike Leigh. The film is Secrets and Lies. This is the film from 1996 from Mike Leigh, and it stars, among others, in its really splendid cast, people like Brenda Blethyn and Timothy Spall and Marianne Jean-Baptiste and Phyllis Logan and Claire Rushbrook and Michelle Austin and Leslie Manville, Ron Cook, Lee Ross, Elizabeth Barrington, and others. This is the really splendid drama, which is Secrets and Lies. And if we were to try to focus on the essence of the plot or story of the film, I think we would discover, or we could focus in on the fact that there are many characters that are here within the environment of the film. And so we have many different character arcs that we see play themselves out over the course of the running time. And for example, we have a set of characters that could be said to be related in terms of familial bonds. For example, we have the character of Maurice, played by Timothy Spall, and we understand that he is a photographer and he's also married to Monica, played by Phyllis Logan. And also he has a sister, and that sister is Cynthia, who's played by Brenda Blethyn. And Cynthia has a daughter, and they live together, and that daughter is played by Claire Rushbrook, and that is Roxanne. And so we have already a type of family dynamic, or set of couples, if you will. The Maurice-Monica couple, and then the mother-daughter couple of Cynthia and Roxanne. And there are connections between and among them. And we also understand that as we progress through their stories, we understand, or we get a sense of who they are as individuals, and they have their character traits, and they have their likable aspects. They might have other, maybe less than likable aspects to their characters, but all in all, everything about their portrayals is always on a human level, on a type of trying to capture a sense of these people and who they are, who they really are, and not just who they are, but how they react in real time, and how their reactions are true to their character, how the reactions either express who they are, or how the world around them and the people around them affect them in terms of their own, say, identities, but also how they carry on in the environment, in the conversation, in their goings-on, in their relationships with the various people that they encounter. And in this context, we really get to know the dramatic tensions that are part of each of these characters. In particular, we focus on Maurice and Cynthia. There's this brother and sister relationship, and yet we understand that maybe it might be affected through some reason or reasons that may or may not be evident as we watch the film, and it may or may not have to do with how these characters are relating to other characters, Monica and Roxanne, and also Cynthia and Cynthia's past, and what the type of person that Cynthia is, and how she carries on with the people around her, and what it is that she feels or felt in her life that makes her who she is as a person, and how people feel about that, and also how people around her have reacted to same or similar types of situations in the past, and how those matters and those circumstances have made them who they are in this particular moment as we meet them in the film. There's a lot of angst, there is a lot of fighting, there's a lot of tension, and there are a lot of communications, miscommunications perhaps, and there are indeed a lot of secrets and lies. And with this particular family dynamic, or set or series of family dynamics, you then have another component of the film that is introduced, as I say, very early on, and that is the character played by Marianne Jean-Baptiste, who is Hortense. And we follow her story as well in parallel, in essence, with the other characters that we have met, but we also follow Hortense's story, and we understand, or we get a sense of who she is, where she comes from. We understand certain aspects of her own family life, especially involving her mother at the very start of the film. And we also understand early on that she was adopted, and so her mother, at the start of the film, we understand is her adopted mother, and due to circumstances involving her adopted mother passing away, again very early on, this also begins, or we see the journey that Hortense is on in terms of trying to find who her birth mother is. And this journey, or this endeavor in trying to find the truth as to her parents and her mother, and indeed also her father, who her parents are, this leads her to a journey where she will cross paths in a very dramatic way with the characters that I was mentioning earlier, so Maurice and Monica and Roxanne and Brenda Blethyn's character Cynthia. And when their character paths intersect or collide, there we see even more dramatic tensions revealed. There we see even more circumstances and complexities introduced, or perhaps revealed. Those complexities were already there. They are just becoming revealed. Perhaps that's another way to say it. And when we see these combinations emerge between and among these various characters, and the interplay between and among them, we finally begin to get a sense of the true scope and dynamic of this work, being a very multifaceted and almost epic scale film that is about the intimate intricacies of how we, or how people, try and succeed or fail in making human connections, and what the consequences are of the success or failure of such endeavors in making human connections. And in particular, if there are cases where characters have failed to make a human connection that is meaningful, what are the consequences of those situations, and how those consequences are carried throughout the lives and throughout many years, held in secret, held within the hearts, locked away, never to be revealed until certain events happen, such as the collision course between and among characters who have hitherto not been revealed. Therein lies the one of the fundamental sources of the emotionally powerful, dramatic tension of this amazing work. It is a truly amazing work from filmmaker Mike Leigh. This is the film which is called Secrets and Lies. And let me also add that this film, Secrets and Lies, is, as I say, from the mid to late 90s. And it was a film that I remember at the time seeing in the theater, and I fell in love with it immediately upon seeing it. And the film really stayed with me, and I was able also to watch it rather frequently on, say, home media release, VHS rental, and the like. It became one of my favorite films from the filmmaker Mike Leigh, because it is so rich, and it is so deep, and the details are so absorbing from the viewpoint of the viewer. And it's quite a satisfyingly challenging work, in the sense that it shows us information. It gives us or reveals information about who these characters are sometimes, and then other times it withholds information, or it gives us just a little bit, but maybe not the entire picture. That way, we as viewers are equipped, or we are permitted or allowed perhaps, to try to put the puzzle pieces together as to what the circumstances of these characters' lives must have been like, say, prior to the film or outside the scope of the film. What were they like as children, for example? What was it like for them growing up? Where would they have been living? What kinds of situations have they gotten into? And how that life story can be revealed in little subtle details. Again, it's not directly giving us information in that way, but it is at the same time revealing it in other more, say, finely applied, poetically, sort of poetically placed manners that I think Mike Leigh and also the performers here, who provide these wonderful representations of their characters, what they do and their choices as performers, and also the choices that the filmmakers make in giving us this information and trying to tell the story from a direct vantage point, but also indirectly. And I find this to be such a wonderful and engaging and absorbing way to tell a story. And the story itself is brilliant. It is one of, as I say, when I saw the film, I fell in love with it immediately. Now, I cannot claim to understand or know absolutely every single detail that's going on. I didn't back then. I certainly don't now. But that being said, it is still for me it is one of the most moving films that I saw back in the day, back in the 90s, when I was still a teenager, but still discovering cinema and the beauty and glory and potential of going to the cinema and learning something new and realizing something about these characters, and thus potentially, perhaps, maybe, realizing a little bit of something about myself in the process. And Secrets and Lies was one of those films that was like a discovery for me when I was growing up. And in that vein, or in that spirit, when I heard the news that Criterion was going to release it, I was so over the moon. And when it indeed arrived, I was still over the moon. And when I saw it and when I watched it, I was still yet again over the moon. This is one of my favorite films, and I'm so happy that it is here in this wonderful presentation from Criterion. This is the film Secrets and Lies. This is the Criterion Collection release, which is purported to be based on a 2K digital restoration of the film. And the presentation is, I think, really splendid and wonderful. And we also have the supplements here. Now, I think in terms of quantity, on paper, it may look, or it will probably look to some, or perhaps many, that this has, relatively speaking, a small number of supplemental materials. But I think that the actual content or the quality of those supplemental materials is very, very high indeed, and I'll try to explain why I believe that. But first, we have a section of the supplement which is referred to in the menu as Mike Leigh. And when you push the button, you click on it, it takes you to two sub-supplements. The first being described as a 2020 interview with Gary Yershon. And so what this is Gary Yershon and Mike Leigh are talking one-on-one through an online conference, like a Zoom conference. And it's approximately 30 minutes, and it's indicated as having been recorded in 2020. This is a great discussion because you can tell that the two of them have a friendly rapport with each other, and there are some really wonderful and pointed questions directed towards Mike Leigh about the making of the film, certain details that emerged. There's a great detail, for example, about Cynthia, the Brenda Blethyn character, and where she lives. And there's a particular design in terms of her living space and where the toilet, the lavatory, where it's located in the space. And there's a really kind of lovely discussion that the two gentlemen have about that particular detail, for example, and how that is, in essence, something that is part of the real life fabric of the environment that is being portrayed. It also shows a little bit about Cynthia's character, and perhaps a little bit about the where she is in terms of her maybe financial status or class. And it also recalls certain details, or it reminds the people here of their own biographical details about their own lives growing up. And so I found this as an example, a really fascinating way that this conversation turns. And it goes in many places as well, in terms of how, for example, Mike Leigh was talking about certain scenes that that he had to fight for, in essence, with the producers or the powers that be in order to keep them included, because perhaps on paper they might seem to be separate from, or maybe tangential to, the actual direct plot of the film, and so they could be excised. But in fact, according to Mike Leigh and how he describes it here and also in another supplement, they actually have a very spiritual and thematic core connection with the story and the way that the character of the Timothy Spall character of Morris, how he handles certain situations of stress and potential emotional delicacy. And he shows a certain character strength, which I think is very key and very important when we understand Morris's own character arc, which comes in a very interesting way, almost full circle, when we reach the extraordinary climax of the film Secrets and Lies. And so this discussion that Mike Leigh has about these seemingly superfluous scenes are really given a lot of life and a lot of breadth, and Mike Leigh's arguments for the case are very convincing. And when you see the film, I think it becomes very clear that they are very absorbing and quite essential scenes in those ways. But to hear Mike Leigh discuss them further is very rewarding. So that's another great example. And also we have the discussion of the reaction of the film, the critical reaction of the film, and the also the popular reaction to the film. And also there's an interesting discussion, which is very relevant to the plot itself, of course, about the concept of adoption and the idea of the character of Hortense, the Marianne Jean-Baptiste character, trying to find her birth mother. And Mike Leigh tells stories or tells or recalls certain episodes about how he understood that there were a lot of people who watched this film who were themselves adopted, and they saw in the story of Hortense something about themselves, and it inspired them. According to Mike Leigh, he got a lot of correspondences and fan mail and letters about how people were very inspired by Hortense's story, and I found that aspect to be so fascinating. I admit that I understood the story aspect and the character aspect of Hortense and her particular journey and quest, if you will, in trying to find this particular person. But I must admit, it wasn't until I heard these comments by Mike Leigh that it didn't strike me until I heard those comments just how potent and powerful that particular character arc and journey really is, especially for people or viewers who might be finding themselves in same or similar situations. And so hearing those comments really brought home the fact that this was a very impactful type of experience for viewers. For example, people who identified with, say, Hortense's story, or people identified with other characters, maybe Timothy Spall's character, etc. Roxanne, Claire Rushbrook's character as well, who is also, I must say, just as a side note here, the character of Roxanne, too, is one of the most fascinating characters. This film, they're all fascinating. Maurice, Monica, their relationship, and what the little details and the little clues or hints that are that seem to be there throughout the film, but nothing is directly revealed necessarily, but there's something of an undercurrent between them, and somehow affects their relationship. And also, it might have something to do with how their relationships with other people in the film are also affected. In particular, the relationship between Monica and Cynthia. So that's an example too, but I was mentioning also the character of Roxanne, who is the daughter of Cynthia, and that's Claire Rushbrook's character. And I really love her characterization as well. There is this idea how she is a child who is growing up and becoming an adult, and that is actually a plot point of the film in terms of her birthday and how she is turning into a grown-up, and the implications of that, and also how people around her are reacting. And we see in particular how Monica and Maurice feel about that, and also how Cynthia, her mother, feels about that, and how that reveals even more about their character dynamics. But also we see how the world in this film views a character like Roxanne, who is the everyone's child, in a manner of speaking. And yet at the same time, Mike Leigh and Claire Rushbrook and the performance really show us various levels of emotional sensitivity and quite a keen ability to observe the world around her. And I'm talking about Roxanne. And so she shows in many aspects a lot of wonderful type of epiphany, or the power of epiphany, which is sometimes so powerful that it catches the characters around her off guard and catches viewers off guard. It certainly catches me off guard in a really lovely way. And so that's another great example. And also Hortense, too, the character of Marianne Jean-Baptiste, the way that her character is painted and portrayed by the emotional brushstrokes that Marianne Jean-Baptiste and Mike Leigh and others bring to the table. Such a beautiful performance, and it's so layered, and it's real, and it feels true, and she feels like a human being who is trying to find the truth, but she's dealing with a lot of emotional baggage and a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. And sometimes there are feelings of anger and frustration that you can tell, but she's also trying to maintain her sense of calm and composure in this very wildly unpredictable situation. And so this whole network of characters, not to mention other characters that I haven't mentioned here, but every single character that we meet is a real powerful and emotionally portrayed one. And so there is this way that Mike Leigh, when he's talking about the process, you really get a sense of how he's focusing in on the power and the respect that he is giving to his performers in order to try to craft and create the best possible character portraits that are appropriate to this particular film or whatever project he's working on at the moment. And so you get this sense and then some in this particular discussion with Gary Yershon. Again, the 2020 interview, approximately 30 minutes. A great highlight. Please check it out if you can. But that's not all, because we then also have within this Mike Leigh section of the supplements a 1996 audio interview. This is an interview that Mike Leigh gave to Michel Simon, and this is approximately 1 hour and 29 minutes. So it's very long. It's audio only, so we hear the audio, and I admit that there were times when maybe the audio was a little bit difficult to make out, but it wasn't totally inaudible. So you can listen in through its entirety, and this is a very engaging, energetic interview, and Mike Leigh goes over a lot of points about the making of the film, certain production details and histories, certain choices of character. Michel Simon asks, for example, as to what were the reasons behind the choices of showing certain characters but perhaps maybe withholding the stories of other characters. What were some of the choices involved in focusing in on these particular character arcs versus not focusing on other character arcs? And so Mike Leigh goes into a very energetic, perhaps an aggressively energetic way of expressing or responding to these questions. And there are some also really interesting indications about Hortense and her character, and the way in which the film and Mike Leigh are trying to approach the issue of race, because race is also a theme that is directly and indirectly handled in this film, and in particular the relationship dynamic between the character of Hortense and then the character of Cynthia, and also Hortense's story and how that is portrayed. And so this becomes part of the discussion as well in this 1996 audio interview. And also the further details into the reactions to the film, and also the way that Mike Leigh deals with creative choices, names. There's a fascinating exchange about the idea of titles and choices made about the input of the particular actors, what they have to say about a character choice and the way that a character is represented or presented. So here is another great interview. It's very long, and it doesn't have any. It is very long, and so, but it is very rich and densely filled with information, again from Mike Leigh himself, and he presents it in a very energetic manner. So this is a great one to listen to. So you have the 2020 interview, and you have this 1996 audio interview, again from the perspective of Mike Leigh with regard to this film, Secrets and Lies. Also, it's primarily about Secrets and Lies, but there are also some comparisons that are made, other allusions and references made to other Mike Leigh works, such as Life is Sweet or Naked. There's actually a really great exchange about how one character, a type of maybe supporting character who appears, relatively speaking, quite briefly, and yet his character seems to be suggestive of the world of Naked, the film by Mike Leigh, And I found that comparison to be very interesting, and that brings us to a really interesting way to compare and contrast the two films, Naked and Secrets and Lies. And that's part of the discussion that's touched upon in these interviews. So for that and for other reasons, I think if you can, please check out these interviews with Mike Leigh. They are so worth listening to and watching. But then we continue with the supplements with the second part of the supplement, which is called Marianne Jean-Baptiste. And when you push the button and you select that, you can find a one-on-one interview between or discussion between Marianne Jean-Baptiste and Corina Antrobus. And this is from 2020 and approximately 27 minutes. And this is also a really lovely discussion conversation where we hear from Marianne Jean-Baptiste. Again, she plays the character of Hortense, and we hear her a little bit of information about how she ended up working with Mike Leigh and how she ended up getting this particular role, and also the way in which Mike Leigh works and how she approached her character based on that type of artistic dynamic. And also talking about the information that she knew as a particular participant or performer in the film, and how she didn't necessarily have a complete roadmap, as it were, as to what the story was. She, in essence, is describing how she knew her part. But then when it came time to meet the other actors and to create the scenes, it created this interesting dynamic that she was in a position of being able to react in the moment, and then being able to use those feelings or reactions in order to further build the scenes with the other performers, and thus create those scenes of the particular film. And so I think this particular example or the example of when Hortense and Cynthia meet face to face for the first time. That's, I think, a really famous example that's brought up here and elsewhere in the supplements, and also in general in critical discussions. And so it's wonderful to hear Marianne Jean-Baptiste speak to the process and how she worked in this particular environment, because her performance is it's extraordinary. It is absolutely extraordinary. And indeed, also, the conversation does touch upon the critical reaction to the film, and also the recognition that a lot of the performers had, including Marianne Jean-Baptiste. And there was an interesting detail. As I say, I saw the film in the mid to late 90s when it was released, and also I was watching the Academy Awards at the time, and so I was aware of all the awards that, all the nominations that this film received. And one of them was Marianne Jean-Baptiste for Best Supporting Actress at the time. And so that was referred to, but I didn't realize until I was listening to this particular conversation about how historic that particular nomination was. And I remember I was thinking back at the time that very little was mentioned about this particular aspect, about how historic it was. And in fact, Marianne Jean-Baptiste, in her discussion here, she mentions how, yes, it was historic, but she also mentions how it wasn't really brought up that much in the press. And so when I heard her comment in this particular supplement about that, I was really struck, and it really moved me. And I didn't realize this until that moment, that, my goodness, this was wow. And so that's another example of where this conversation goes. It's a wonderful conversation in that way, and we also just to hear Marianne Jean-Baptiste and to see her expressions, and to hear, for example, how her family watching the film and getting their reactions, and her describing how they feel about watching Marianne Jean-Baptiste in this film. These are lovely stories. These are lovely recollections that she is so gracious and so generous in devoting her time to share with us, the viewers of this particular Criterion release. And so this is a really lovely, lovely conversation with Marianne Jean-Baptiste, who is a crucial, essential part of this film, Secrets and Lies. And it, as I say, and I'll say it again, her performance is utterly extraordinary, and it is so lovely and beautiful to get a chance to hear a little bit of her recollections and thoughts and comments in this conversation. Wonderful. Please check it out if you can. This is the conversation with Marianne Jean-Baptiste. Again, approximately 27 minutes. And then the supplements are concluded with the inclusion of a trailer. And I've taken the liberty of removing the insert, which is one of these fold-out inserts, and that's okay. It has some lovely stills or lovely pictures, and it has the essay which is included. I'm not a big fan of the fold-outs. I wish it was the staple booklet, but this is still a really lovely presentation, and it includes Ashley Clark's essay, which is called Seen and Not Seen. And this is a great essay by Ashley Clark. He goes into some lovely detail about the real potential effect of the film, why it's so powerful, why it's so effective, the reactions, and also the thematic concerns of the film. Again, another great essay. Ashley Clark's essay here is wonderful. Please check it out. Please read it if you can. I should point out too, these essays are great. It's probably best to watch the film first and then read the essay, because I think the essays rely on a certain maybe knowledge base of the film, having seen the film. And so watch the film and then read the essays by Criterion, including this great one, which is included with the Secrets and Lies release. So the Ashley Clark essay, Seen and Not Seen. And in that way, I'd like to conclude my remarks by also saying that, once again, Secrets and Lies is one of my favorites. It was one of my favorites growing up, and I was so fortunate to have been able to discover it when I did at that time of my life, back in the mid to late 90s. And it's been with me ever since. And then when Criterion released it, here it is, and I am so thrilled. I'm so thrilled that the film is here and it's presented the way it's presented. And I should say also, and I forgot to mention that, as I said, the supplements might seem, in terms of quantity, to be somewhat small, but again, the contents are really lovely. The Mike Leigh interviews and the Marianne Jean-Baptiste interview. Really great stuff. So please check it out for those supplements. And the film itself, of course, the film remains utterly powerful, emotionally moving, arresting. It has bleak moments. It has bleak moments. It also has optimistic moments. It has moments of miscommunication and tragedy, but it also has moments of triumph and connection, and the expression, if you will, of the whole range of human emotion that is on display through the lives of these characters, so vividly and so poetically and so beautifully portrayed within this film by Mike Leigh, which is called Secrets and Lies. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.